Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another episode of Podcash Africa. Karibuni sana from wherever you are. My name is Amos Ngahu, and like we always say, listen and listen carefully. This is not just about counting your money, it's about making it count. Today, we are talking about debts. Please check on your neighbor, check on your friends, and just look out for them, because debt is a very sensitive thing. Wengine tumechoma. Some of us wanashabadilisha majina. They are calling us Dennis. Vile madeni ni mingi. So today I want us to address the issue of debt. And first of all, it's a very emotional thing. And I'd like us to just work out and talk about the steps that can be able to help you deal with your debt situation. Now, number one, debt is supposed to help you leverage on other people's money. It is supposed to be an enabler. For instance, if you're in business and you're supposed to do what? You're supposed to get a bigger deal, get more stock. You can actually leverage on that, make more money out of other people's money, and end up paying less interest than the profit you're making. But however, statistics are not indicating so. Things are really bad. Majority of us Kenyans, and to say by far and large Africans, we take debt for consumption. Now, it happens that every time any government, wherever you're coming from, any government, when they are dealing with debt, international debt, most of us become auditors and we are castigating our government for using debt to pay recurrent expenses. These are salaries and stuff like that. And this has been happening across Africa. If we are doing that, can we also now address our personal debt? Now, a shocking revelation came out, and in one of the published articles, is that during COVID, the graph on Friday afternoons for Fuliza was higher than any other day. Now, my good Kenyans and my good Africans, Fuliza is that advance we get from Safaricom. I don't know what it is in your country, but these are some sort of digital loans. Now, the surge went up on Fridays. That does not indicate that Kenyans are very good in doing business on Friday. It simply meant that people were using that money for consumption, for sherehe. So today, as we address debt, I'm going to look at several steps, and we're going to look at 4 steps on how to address your debt. Before you even look at the amounts you have as debt, the first step, please follow these steps. The first step is asking yourself, why on earth did I get myself into this debt? A research was done on one of the highest bridges that people jump off to commit suicide. And there are only 2 survivors in history who ever survived that jump. You jump from the bridge all the way to the river. Now, what happened is that there are only 2 people who have survived that fall. And one of them was interviewed. What happens, or what goes through your mind when you go off the bridge? And they say the first thing that goes to your head is regret. That is the same thing that hits you when you're applying for debt. Probably salespeople have come to you, they've told you you can access this debt. And when you start repaying it, is when you start asking yourself, did I really have to take this debt? And we want to reverse that so that you'll be having that mindset before you take that debt. Ask yourself why. Sometimes it could be a behavior you're used to. Some of you are used to borrowing from digital loans, and you're now believing that your limits are your monies. They are not. Sorry, leo nawasomea sana. Number 2, you also need to address your culture. Okay? You've seen people borrow. As a child, you are being sent to a shop. You're being told, give me bread and milk, my dad will come and pay. So you're used to consumption debt. And that is why some of these things you have to address before you start looking at the amounts you have. Now, number 2, you have to list down all your debts and be realistic. Don't just look at the debt that is urgent. Some of us are struggling with digital loans, and we've been listed in CRB negatively for very small amounts. So list them down and categorize them, and do a nice Excel. Is it a bank loan? Is it a car loan? Is it a personal loan that I owe other people? Is it a circle loan? Is it a Shylock? Hello. Is it a mortgage? Just list down those loans and the amounts. Okay. And number 3, this is where now you start to manage the relationships. This is where you start to audit these relationships. What is happening here? Okay, some of us already tumechoma. Yeah, you are very good at avoiding people. It is natural for you to avoid people that you owe money. Okay, so start auditing these relationships, because what normally happens before you lose money, money is the last thing you lose. You have lost respect, you have lost relationships, and this is the time that you need to address them. Okay, and I remember, for me, I'm not a very, also, I have my own history. I remember my first car loan, and I keep telling people this story. My first car loan was out of pressure because my boss suggested that I should not be working like an animal. So he approved my first car loan, which was a Toyota NZE. Okay, and I remember very well, it was a KBF 851A for Amos. And for those of you who have acquired their first car early in your life, you understand what it means. You cannot tint the car immediately. Why? Because people need to know the owner. You put in that loud music, it is not well fixed, so it is vibrating the whole car. And then you put that thing we call greater than, unaekelea mkono hivi, people must know, you know. And for me, that was an influence that I was trying to prove something. That's how I got myself into debt. That is not the end of the story. So several years later, we had gone for a burial, and all my bosses were having big cars, and mine had to be pushed. And that was very interesting, because they were now starting to trash talk, and they were telling me, you need to move from kuingia gari to kupanda gari. So lo and behold, your guess is as good as mine. I applied for another car loan. And the reason I'm giving you this story is for you to see how practical and how easy it is to get yourself into debt, but very difficult to get yourself out of. That's why they say kukopa harusi kulipa matanga. For a quick translation, it means when you're borrowing, it's a wedding, but when you're paying, it's a funeral. And I got myself another car, a big car. But at some point, I left that employer, and they were not happy that we left a good number. So what happened? They actually terminated the contract they had with the bank. So the bank was directly dealing with us. So if you skipped a month, they would actually send people to auction your car. It was malicious. But however, I had a 411, and I was given a letter showing that my car needs to be repossessed. So what would you do? And comment as a Kenyan. And thank you very much. I went and hid my car in my brother's house. It had no tracker, so they could not track it. But I asked myself, for how long would I hide this? And one of the same bankers told me, we have seen you on interviews. Do you charge consultation here? Why don't I give you a till number? You can, someone can be paying through that account, so that the bank can see there's money coming in and they can deduct their loan. And that was the breakthrough, because I learned to pay my loans in small installments. And after about 3 months, I was able to pay the entire balance of 450. Makofi, nipigie makofi. So now back to us identifying how we can manage these relationships. Okay, if they are Shylocks, please honor the amount that you're supposed to pay. Honor your commitment. If you're not able to, it is always very important to renegotiate. This happens as well with SACCOs. And sometimes there are 3 ways of dealing. If you have many loans, there are 3 ways of dealing with them. So when you're dealing with these debts, you're going to realize that if you have many, you have to actually categorize them in terms of how bad the loan is and the one that is quite negotiable. So let's say, for example, you have a bank loan, you have a SACCO loan, and you have a Shylock loan. Depending on the facility you have, either if the SACCO loan is cheaper than the bank and they have good terms, they can be able to buy off the 2 loans. And then if you had a loan existing, it's like a top up, and then you can negotiate the term. It's like you've started afresh and negotiate for a longer term. Some of us even have better terms. If you're an employee of a bank, some of you have better terms than even the SACCO. So you can actually talk to the bank, they buy off all the other loans so that you're left with one loan repaying. That is a solution I gave. That time it used to be city council. I was in one of those council meeting, and those, those kanjo, they're called what? Uh, those kanjo guys that are always very, very tough. and they always, sometimes back then they used to beat up people. I went to one of their meetings and I saw most of them on negative pay, and were able to sit down and see how they could consolidate through the circle. So the circle actually bought their other loans, and then they were able to sort it out. That is consolidation. Number two, this is, and this is a very big one. This is for digital loans. If you are on digital loans, I will start by telling you your limit is not your money. Your limit is not your money. That is other people's money. You still have to pay it. Okay? So this, when you're dealing with digital loans, it is very important for you to consolidate and know how much money do I owe these digital loans. Now reset them to the time that you get money. So if you're employed, you can actually say money has come today. Let's say you owe about 20,000 to 4 different apps. So I'm assuming that is 5,000, 5,000. So how you deal with that is repay everything. It is always good to repay so that you reset your dates when you have money. If you pay, let's say you've been paid today and you owe them 20,000, pay the 20,000. If you need extra and that what you've been left with is not enough to run you through the month, what you can do is borrow slightly lower than the amount you owed them. Let's say you owed them 20,000, you've paid them. Now you can borrow 17. Squeeze with the 17. I guarantee you, if you squeeze with the 17, they will push you until the next month. The next month, you repay the 17. And then you ask yourself, do I need to borrow the 17 or I can borrow 15? And then the trend continues, and now you're able to do what? You're able to slowly come out of this. And never forget, once you're done with these digital loans, please, and I know it's hard, please delete those apps. They are doing more damage than good. Okay, you cannot just pull out. You have to slowly get out of it. Now, part C of dealing now with loans, with many loans, is refinancing. Back to my boss who used to tell me to borrow a car, and they were quickly to get a car loan, and they quickly approved my loan. This guy used to buy a car and every year resell. Okay, and he would quickly buy a car that has a quick resale. So by the end of the year, it has not depreciated much, and he would sell it. But you see, remember, his liquidity on his payslip was quite high. So, but the bosses needed him to have a car. So if he can afford, they would still approve a new car. And I came to realize the reason is we were getting car loans at 4% then. But if you took a bank loan or a SACCO loan to get a piece of land, you'd end up paying 12% and above. So he was actually using a car loan at 4%. The money he would sell the car after he's repaid it quickly, the money he sold the car, he would buy a property or develop an existing property. So that is refinancing, using a cheaper loan directed towards something, because as long as you're paying, nobody really cares, and redirecting it to a project that is more profitable. That may not work for corporates because that is an irregular thing. So as we continue to deal with this debt, be very intentional about debt. I normally tell people, start with the small debts. Okay, start with those digital debts so that you're getting that discipline. It is, I don't remember who said this, but debts are like small children. The smaller they are, the more noise they make. So as you deal with debt, as you confront your debt, follow the steps to be able to come out of it. And remember, debt is essentially supposed to help you leverage and make more than you'd have done with your own capital. Okay? And that is why we normally say if you borrow 10,000 from a bank, that is your problem. But if you borrow a billion from the bank, that is the bank's problem. And this is why we have to be emotionally competent to be able to know, do I really need to get into this debt? And if you really think, sometimes I've hit rock bottom, then I came to realize that even rock bottom has a basement. So as you deal with debt, also remember CRB, Credit Reference Bureau, may not be your worst enemy. Sometimes it is good for them to list you so that other people who want to lend you money, they must run a report and get how you're performing. They are not landing you into more debt. So you must be able to understand that sometimes, even if you're in CRB, that's not the worst that could happen. But the worst that could happen is for you to allow this debt to get into you, and you're not moving and you're distracted. So once again, and that has been it about debt. And before we end this conversation, I'd like to thank you, our sponsors, Cloud9, Wapi Makofia Cloud9. And for you to be able to, Cloud9 is the biggest digital bank. It's coming up shortly. So you please sign up on the list. There's a waiting list, and then you'll be able to find us there. Thank you so much. My name is Amos Ngahu. This is Podcash Africa. Remember, it's not just about counting your money, it's about making it count.